Today's episode is brought to you by the House of Fraud. The House of Fraud is the best community for fraud leaders and fraud experts to share and learn from each other in an exciting and engaging new format. In addition to our discussion community and the incredible fraud jobs board, the House of Fraud has 7 completely original series, like Building a Suit of Armor to Protect Your Business from Fraud with Alexander Hall, Rant Time with yours truly, where raw fraud truth meets practical solutions, Fraud Stories in Real Life with Brian Davis, where fraud experts share their most pivotal moments of their careers, and even a completely unscripted fraud chat with all 3 of us that you never know where it's going to go. Come see what hundreds of your fraud-fighting friends already know by using the link in the description below to get your very own membership to the community, because no one goes to school for fighting fraud. I'll see you in there. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Fraud Boxer. I have Rob back from Arkowl. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Now, you have been a previous guest on the show, and we just got back from MRC, and we had some conversations about, getting back together, getting the band back together and doing another episode. And this episode, we do want to talk about Arkowl again, kind of go a little more in depth into it. But I think the big thing that we really want to talk about today is what we've learned running these businesses, because that's always an interesting thing. Like, we've been in this space for both of us for a long time, but you have had your business for quite a while now that you've been running as an actual business. And I'm a little less than that. It's a couple of years now on mine. But I think that what we've learned in our journey along the way has gone a long ways, especially for me in practical applications in what I do with my fraud life. So what do you feel about that?
I'm looking forward to talking about Arkowl, about business. I live it. We live it every day, right?
Every single day. And I think that people that are product users might take for granted what goes into just starting the product that you're using every day or the product that you're listening to. Like, I know, and we'll talk about it as we go along, like my show has been quite the evolution from when it first started with like different microphones, now doing video, experimenting with different tools, different lights and all those sorts of things. But let's start a little bit. If you could give us, for people that haven't listened to the old episode, let's start with a quick overview of what Arkowl is, who you are, and then we'll get into how it all started, if we could.
Yeah, for sure. Arkowl is a data provider. We do data enrichment. You provide us an email address, phone number, IP address, regular address, and we provide data back. So we provide more than what you gave us. Our goal has been to help in the decision making. So whether that's machine learning or an analyst trying to figure out, should I approve, should I deny, all of that needs data. With more data, you can make better decisions. And I think that's kind of common sense in the world, is you want to have the most information at hand if you're debating about a decision.
Absolutely. And I know I've used your service. I used it at my previous job as well. And we do use it here from time to time. But with your business, as it is in its current form, if I'm not mistaken, there's 2 main ways that you can get it. It's me as like a fraud analyst, I could go in, log into a portal, put in information and get results out. But you guys also have an API that's more, we could be hit in a real-time basis, or even other vendors in a B2B fashion that are in our space are also using your data, correct?
Correct. I would say most of our usage comes from machines. So machines taking in the extra data to write rules around it or to write algorithms that help making those decisions prior to an analyst seeing it.
So it's not just copy and paste. It can fully be consumed automatically and have automation ran around it, right?
Correct.
So let's dive into companies. So how did you start? Like, how did it begin? I think if I'm not mistaken, you used to work at Target and you had to kind of build this on your own, and then it became something more. So if you could kind of run us through that story, how Arkowl even started, please.
I think, I'll even go further back. I'll kind of share how I started, because that's really
Sure.
key in Arkowl's start. is just the ability to take that risk, the kind of the feeling of being unemployed. I don't think I shared on the last episode, my experience being unemployed. I had graduated college in '08. And then my first job out of college, I was a financial advisor. I had gotten
Oh,
my Series 7. I was actually giving financial advice as to which mutual funds, which insurance products. And I think when I was there, I was reading a book as to how to sell a mutual fund because I was struggling, and I was reading a book as to
that
how to
was a
sell your mutual
difficult
fund.
time to be selling those sorts of
Oh yeah,
things.
yeah. And one of the things in the book was you have to really love something. In order to sell something, you have to really love it because nobody's going to buy in unless you naturally believe in it, unless you naturally love it. So I was, scraping to say, how can I love a mutual fund? And, I started convincing myself that, I liked these three over the rest. And I actually started selling. It was really cool. I
Interesting.
didn't uh, I didn't actually end up meeting my sales goal. It's a tough time to sell mutual funds, and I found myself laid off. And not a whole lot of companies wanted financial advisors at that time when I was laid off. So I found myself unemployed for 10 months there. Have you had any seasons of being unemployed?
So I've had a couple of times, but let's go to a more recent time. When I was up in the Bay Area at Gift, I had joined them in early of 2016, and they had just been acquired by First Data, and everything was going fine. But they had a 1 year you can't touch it clause in our after they purchased us, like you can't just like buy it and then lay everybody off. So as soon as that 1 year clause ran out, they laid us all off. So that was actually an interesting time. It was a couple of months. I was like 3 months for me on that one. And what I did in the meantime actually was I started doing consulting work. So I started with GuidePoint, where they send you different sorts of things. You set your hourly rate and you just do like phone calls. But I started doing outbound consultings for hourly rates. And that's actually where FraudBoxer was originally, the concept was started. So that's where I first took the name and reserved it on like LinkedIn, for example. Now I didn't do anything with like a business wise around it. I just took the name and I kind of made some quick little art in like the free Photoshop thing back in the day. But it wasn't anything that was taken seriously. I had dreams and high hopes of making it into a business. But what at the time I had pictured in my head making it a full blown consulting business where like I employ other consultants to go out to other companies and do this consulting work. And I thought it would be easier to find people to buy into that than it was. It ended up like people would talk about it, be like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's do it. And then when the rubber met the road, they were not available to do that sort of thing. So I was still trying to find regular work, and I found it. But that's actually, coincidentally, it's funny that you bring it up in that fashion because yes, unemployment is what led to the original, even the name of FraudBoxer being created.
Wow, that's really cool. I'm looking at the Who Is. Looks like that was 8 years ago.
Was it 2017, right?
Yeah, you got
What?
2016.
Well, I did it all the way in 8/24/2016. I I don't remember doing it that early. See, look at you coming up on there and showing it. Yeah, I don't actually remember doing it that early. I'll put that up on the screen. I mean, everybody, hopefully you saw it. Like that's crazy because it was, I think, February 2017 was when I remember building the website itself on my old host in WordPress and then putting graphics up on there. It was when I moved back to Redondo Beach, actually, when we were on the prep call for this yesterday. I was showing you my old address. It was that I was there, that I was actually starting to work on it there. But there was a time before when I was unemployed, after it was around that same time. It was probably like late 2009, early 2010, or it took me probably about 8-9 months to get solid, like regular, real work again, just because the economy was what it was at that time. So I was just like taking odd jobs. I was actually building websites for people, WordPress sites, like with just like super easy ones about contact forms, galleries, those sorts of things. And that was paying the bills, paying the rent for that time. Like I've always been, even when when tragedy hits, I've always been resourceful enough to be able to find a way to scrape together the funds to be able to live. And that's one thing I guess I pride myself on is I don't give up. At the end of the day.
I think I really like that Jeff Goldblum quote in Jurassic Park, life finds a way, right?
Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah. It does.
I think with my time of being unemployed, the mentality of just we aren't in control. I'm not in control. I saw my future as being a financial advisor at that time. I was gonna grow a book. I was gonna get a CFP. I was gonna get really good at financial advising. And that this was just a huge crimp in that plan, which caused me to think, I'm not in control of my destiny.
Yeah.
And that's how I actually got my start in fraud. Was I got a call out of the blue from a contracting agency just saying, do you want to come? It was Best Buy, and they said, do you want to come in and look at a logistics job where you route trucks? And I said, sure, I'll come in and do that. And we came in, and she said to me, she was like, do you remember what we talked about on the call? Do you remember that job? And I was like, yeah, but refresh my memory. She said, you're going to be working at bestbuy.com in the fraud department, reviewing online orders. And my boss at Best Buy at the time, or my manager, was Jason Taylor. Him and his management team had trained us in fraud and to look for fraud, but don't let it compromise the profit. This is a business. This is a for-profit business.
Yeah.
And what I learned initially as a fraud analyst was I was more of a data gatherer than I was actually analyzing a whole lot. Because if you have, they trained us that if you see this data set, cancel the order. If you see this data set, approve the order. So it was like, I wasn't using a whole lot of intuition a lot of times. It was just, gathering the data to get to the point where I could approve or deny it. And so my fraud analysis really was more data gathering. And so today we are a data provider in the fraud space. After I was actually laid off because I was a seasonal hire for Best Buy. I was a contractor, and hearing how I got started in that contracting role, right? It seemed like I was probably more of a number, but I think, the Best Buy management team did a really great job at making me feel like not a number.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And they actually, it was maybe a couple days after I was laid off. They sent me a message saying, we're going to refer you to jobs we think would suit you.
Wow. That's really nice of them, actually. Like, you don't see a lot of companies, they lay you off and then give us our laptop and then here's the middle finger and out the door you go, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job of, caring about the person, but also recognizing here's the situation they're in. They can't afford as a department to keep me there. So I went laid off again. But at that time when I was laid off, I had the experience of, getting the job that I had in fraud previously. So I had the experience of knowing what it feels like to be laid off and seeing God provide a job, right? So it's like, at that time I was like, okay, God's going to provide. And then it was several months later, I was at Target, in part thanks to, actually it was mostly thanks to Best Buy and the managers there talking with management at Target saying, we see you're building up your fraud department, hire this guy.
Wow. That's really cool.
And so that's how I got my start at Target. Target at that time was building up their team. And so I got to be a part of kind of a grassroots growing of a team, seeing kind of the process for picking a vendor, seeing the process of fraud training. It was just a really cool time. And during that time, it even stood out more to me that I was more of a data gatherer than I was an analyst. I was training on how to gather data. And out of that came Arkowl, or the idea of Arkowl. The idea of Arkowl probably came, as I was thinking about a way to just gather data, well, as an analyst. And then an opportunity arose where one of our sources that we would go to, the Yahoo profile portal, where they'd give you like a picture, a creation date, and kind of some bio of where they're from and stuff. That went away. And so, but it was still provided through the YQL console API. So they were still publicly providing it. They just shut down the web interface.
They probably didn't
for
know
it.
they were doing that.
Yeah. So it was actually going around the industry at that time, a way to utilize the API. So analysts were instructed to go to this API, type in like 3 lines of code and get the response. So we stepped in. I think it took maybe a day for Mike to do the code, or a couple days, but our first check was that Yahoo YQL portal check, which saved an analyst maybe a minute. But we made it where you could just click and it does all those steps, and
yeah, I mean,
just made it really quick.
You do that 60 times in a day, saved an hour. Like that's pretty significant.
So that's how we got our start. We had a lot bigger plans for just a Yahoo check, but we ended up being kind of mostly a Yahoo check for our first couple of years there.
So when did you decide, like, what did you do when you decided to spin this off as an actual business itself? What was like the first thing that you did as far as like creating a business? Did you file the LLC? Did you do a DBA? Did you just create a company? Like,
I think, when you have an idea for a business, you're kind of just like, oh shit, like, and what do I have to do? And kind of that was our thought process. Is once we realized we could have a business on our hands, it was like, I was faced with the question: do I make this leap? Do I quit my day job, and invest in this full time? Do I try to do it on the side? What is this even going to look like? And I think for me, my first step was to just pray about it and just be like, what feels right? And, as I did that, actually, I remember asking, if this is something that you want me to focus on full time, would you give me a sign?
Yeah.
Would you have it be that Target, and the management there actually comes to me and says, Rob, you can't do both these things. You can't focus.
So were you
on
making money
on
Arkowl at Target already? Okay.
No, we just provided my thought was, I actually wasn't entertaining, even though I had this idea for a business. I didn't think just the shortcut to the YQL was a business. And so we created it just to make my job easier for the most part. But then, I was sharing it with the analysts, and everybody loved that as opposed to typing in the 3 lines of code. So then people just started using it. And so then I started to think, maybe this is the start of my business idea that I had. So then at that time, it was maybe the next week after I had prayed that, Target came to me and they said, you can't do both these things. You can't focus on Arkowl and Target. You gotta quit one, and they kind of pressed me to make it. And they said, you have 4 days to make this call.
Wow.
And I kind of thought about it, and I was like, well, that's exactly what I prayed for. Like, I don't need 4 days. I don't want to be 50 years old and regret not taking a leap, after seeing this sign and having this idea on my heart. So as I quit, it kind of felt like being unemployed again, because it was like I was back to not having control. I think working at Target for a paycheck represented me controlling. And
yeah. So mine, like when I was, I mean, I had made the Fraudboxer name and I registered the thing apparently in 2016. Um, the, I had in 2021, I had been asked to do some consulting for another company, a major player in our space. And in order to do that consulting, they wanted to pay a business. They didn't want to pay me personally. Um, so they asked me to formally do it. So in California, we have what's called DBA, or it's a fictitious business name. So think of it as a DBA. So you file with the county that you live in, and then with the name that you want, and then that they send you a piece of paper with a basically an ID on it, and then you have to put it in the paper. Believe it or not, like an actual print paper. So what happens is when you do it, when you file, all these newspapers start sending a bunch of like mail, like snail mail, saying how cheap their rate is to do this. So I picked the one, and you have to like fax it in, like old school fax. So I'd like fax it in and then like send them a check. It has to run for 2 weeks. And if no one objects to your name for 2 weeks, you get to do business as this person. Now it's your real social security number, but somebody could write a check to Fraudboxer and I could deposit that check into a business bank account. All I had to have was a piece of paper. So I was able to open a business account, a business bank account, did all these things. But then by the time I was done with this whole process, the major vendor had decided that they were just going to go ahead and pay me anyways, as me. So it was completely pointless. So I was like sitting on this DBA until 2022 when I had the desire to start the podcast. And I've talked about it before. Like the reason that I started the podcast was, I was having these conversations with people, like just like regular phone conversations. People were calling me, like shooting the shit with me. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if we just recorded that and put it out? Because at the time, there was only one other show in the space. And the audio quality is usually pretty poor on that show. And it goes off topic a lot. And that was something that like a lot of people had feedback about. So I wanted to have these same conversations, but focus more in on the cool stuff that I like about it. And I would still say that Fraudboxer's a selfish show of mine because it's topics that I want to talk about and things that I want to, people that I want to talk to. While at the same time, like sometimes it's not always fraud focused. Like this show isn't just fraud focused, but it's business focused. But it also, has a management side of my podcast that I talk about too. But one of the things that also is unique about my show versus some of the other shows, Ivan's shows more like mine too, is like we actually work in this space. Like my day job, I have a day job, I think everybody's aware of that, is actually doing fraud prevention. And some of the other shows, they don't. They talk about it. They talk about concepts about it, but they haven't been in this industry in a very long time. So their firsthand knowledge is actually secondhand knowledge from what people have told them versus what I actually see and am doing with my day that then I get to bring into these conversations, or I see something happening and I find somebody that's either solving that or having that happen to them, and we jump on the mics and we talk about it. So instead of just having a phone call, we're recording it.
You saw the gap.
It's like true crime podcast. There's a ton of those. There was only one real fraud podcast at the time. And now there's several, which I think a lot of them are great. Even Austin Harris's show is fantastic. The cool stories from when he was a cop, those are great. Ivan's show about how you got into the fraud industry because we all took a different route is excellent. I think that if all these true crime podcasts can exist, like why can't a bunch of fraud ones? And people can pick the ones that they like. Like I'm not trying to kill anybody's business or take anything. Like I'm trying to just exist and enjoy creating content that if other people want to listen to, that's great. That's fine. If they don't, that's great. That's fine. Like it doesn't have to be like an us versus them. Just like with you, like there's multiple data companies, but like you're doing what you want to do the way that you want to do it and it works, right?
Yeah. A lot of our clients actually use us and other data providers. It's kind of rare to run into potential clients who are saying, we want just one, be the one data provider for us, just because there's so many different ways to acquire data. There's so many different types of data, and you need all of it for the different types of fraud that are out there.
Absolutely. And I think with you guys, like you guys don't have address data, do you? Like physical
No.
mailing address?
We So we will in the future. Our differentiation with our data compared with others is that email address is the core that the other data points revolve around. The other the other inputs are satellites to our email. Email is core. You see, every other data provider out there has kind of a core, right? One might be physical address, and then they tack on
Exactly.
email and IP. For others might have IP and then tack on email. For us, we are really good at email, and then we're going to
Yeah.
have all the others as they relate with the email address.
Yeah.
So we started in late 2011. Then we actually registered the business with Minnesota in February 6th, 2012. And
Wow.
kind of to your point, where you had to figure out how to register a business.
Did you have to do the
things
newspaper?
with
Did you have to
them.
do anything in the newspaper?
We didn't have to do anything in the newspaper, but I think we did have to do printed copies, kind of like what you're talking about with faxing stuff.
I will say that, like, since we talk about business evolution, Fraudboxer is now what's called an S corp. It is a full incorporated business. It's no longer a DBA. I am actually on my own payroll. I have ADP payroll. Jordan gets paid he's an employee of Fraudboxer Inc. So that's kind of a new thing. I have an accountant now that helps me set up all those things. She's pretty great, but she also tells me I can't spend so much money. That's what she's supposed to do, right?
My accountant tells us we need to spend more money on food. He says
That's funny.
We're not buying enough food.
That's funny because mine literally told me like straight up the opposite. She said I can buy as much food as I want. That's related to the business, of course. But she had to remind me that it's only 50% tax deductible now. During COVID, it was 100. Now it's only 50% tax deductible. So that kind of changed my opinion. But like for the most part, like when like I'm at a conference or when I'm traveling, it's almost always related in some way to the podcast. So it gets, and like most of my travel that I pay for is in some way related. Like when I go to Aspen, I have a consulting client that lives in Aspen, and usually I'm there visiting him. So that any expenses come out of the Fraudboxer account for that, because he pays Fraudboxer when he pays his bill. So yeah, but I mean, that was a big thing, was moving from DBA where like I paid Schedule C taxes to now this S corp where it has to pay like quarterly taxes, estimated tax, all that sort of thing. Like I just paid my estimated tax the other day, the first one. So, good times. Can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, that's always a fun moment when you're paying estimated tax.
Yeah, and that's why
you've had 1 year behind you of your business if you're paying estimated tax.
You know what really sucks about the 1 year behind me? Is unfortunately, so in California, well, maybe it's the IRS, I don't know. I just did it. Is the cutoff is 12/15. When if you register a business after or 12/15 or later, that year doesn't count as your first year. But my previous accountant, who's no longer with me, incorporated my business on 12/13. So I had to pay the taxes for last year. So technically, this is the second year of it being an S corp, but on the calendar, it's going to be its real first year. So I got kind of screwed on that. I was a little upset, but bygones be bygones. I got a new accountant. She's a CPA, and she's excellent. So she straightened all this stuff out. She's the one that set up all the ADP and all the, like, I have to do unemployment taxes and all of that stuff now. So good times. What really sucks? Like, because this is what we really run here. Let's talk about our businesses and what we've learned as businesses is when you have a business account as a DBA or a sole proprietorship, you cannot change the status of the business on that bank account. You have to close that account and reopen it as the new business type. You can change the name, but if the business type changes between like sole proprietorship, C Corp, S Corp, you have to fully close the bank and reopen it. And that was a nightmare because I had so much business being ran through that bank account, like all the stuff that I pay for as far as like subscriptions, like how we're recording this right now, how I edit this, my Chat GPT, because got to use that, all the business deposits for like the merch and all that, everything was in that bank account and everything had to be switched over. Wasn't happy about that.
Yeah, sometimes you run into that sort of stuff. I think one of the things I've learned with running a business is in every year, you're going to have those things that that you're like, man, I love running a business. And then you're going to have those things every year where people ask you something or people say, how's the business going? And it's kind of like you could think of all the things wrong with
Yeah.
the business that are going on. So each year kind of has both that, right?
It's so weird because like for me, and I'm sure it's for you, like ideas, you never know when an idea is going to come to you or when that epiphany is going to come to you. Like you could be standing in the shower or you could be brushing your teeth and the idea that you need to execute on happens right now. And like a great example is as I'm starting another show that's going to be coming out in June. And it's a different type of show. It's still going to be fraud focused, but it's a more off the cuff, more news oriented. So I had this grand idea in my head one day of getting a green screen, like a whole thing, and setting up a desk, like Pat McAfee style. Because actually one of my vendors came to town and he said he was at the gym and he saw Pat McAfee on the TV and he thought it was me for a minute there. And I was very flattered by that. So I figured on my new show, why don't I set up the stage more like Pat's? So I bought all of this stuff from the business account to try to build that sort of stage setup. But then when I started getting the cameras going, it looked so bad. Like it just looked terrible. And if you go and you look at other like YouTube shows or other podcasts that have video, the background is always more like this, where there's stuff on the walls that's more related to the personality of the host or the type of show than just a green screen or a black screen or even a white screen with a desk with trinkets. So what the new show is going to do is I actually ordered, it's not here yet, it comes tomorrow. I ordered a pub table. So like the round ones that you see at the bar, a lot of our conferences have it. And then I ordered like one of the toppers that they put over the top of it. And it's going to sit back here over probably closer to like where the amp is over here. And then I'll be able to stand and I'll have my laptop on it, but the camera will still be back over here where it is. So you have more of me in the frame and you'll be able to have like little trinkets and I'll be able to be more animated with my show than I am on this show. Cause this show, like I try to be more technical, a little more focused on my guests specifically than having fun with the topics. Like I try to, this is more educational than the other show is going to be more entertainment based. So that was one of those things where like I laid awake for 2 nights after I built this stage over here to the left of me. And I was like, I just spent like $350 trying to build out like a stage using some of the stuff they already had, using all these, I was trying to like, I have these wireless lapel mics and I want to be able to walk around because I don't want to have to restructure how this mic is done. All for nothing. And so I was laying in bed, and then like probably like 3:30 in the morning is what it hit. Do a pub table, do the back, use your same background, everything's the same. And then I tucked with the partner that I'm gonna be doing the show on. I can't really announce him just yet. But he, it's like we must have had the epiphanies at the same time because we jumped on one and he's like, I've been noticing these types of backgrounds that people have. And I was like, bro, me too. I was like, it has to be like in our environment and we have to leave it clean. I mean, you could do a little bit of a little fuzzy background. What do they call it? Bokeh or whatever. But then my 4K camera does that, but it's washing me out. I got the lights. I got big lights and they're not on right now. And green screen's back in storage. Tripod will be busted out. I just need a new camera. Yeah. But that's the thing, like with my show is like outside of the business, like it's been evolving as far as technology to get the most out of how it looks, how I sound, how it's distributed. Like these things matter, how the clips are cut. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. I think, when it comes to business, my mentality is to really focus on the product, kind of like going back to that financial advising days. I really want to love the product. And out of loving the product, you're naturally going to create the best product. You're naturally going to sell your product, right? So it sounds like, with your product, you're putting a lot more love into it. I think a lot more love is going to come out of it.
And, I think that's a really interesting point because I didn't realize when I started this show, I didn't realize how much I'd love it. Like, I thought I was just going to be recording phone calls basically and putting them out and people doing it. But when we started to introduce video on some of the other shows that I have over on House of Fraud, those went video first. And we recorded a bunch of episodes before we launched. So we had a bunch of content. So when we started to introduce video into this was when I really started to love content creating. Like, I understand why YouTubers do it. I get it now because it's so fun to see these little ideas you have in your head, like, become something. And I don't know if everybody that's doing our content creation in our space do it for love or if they do it for money. But I love this and I want to make more. And that's what I think is like, I'm having so much fun with. And like even my girlfriend gets like crazy. She's like, you can't do more. You can't do like 50 shows. I'm like, why? Why can't I? Like, I got the neighbors now, because I got new neighbors. So they're like super confused as to how I actually make money. If tell them I have a day job, but they're like, listen to the podcast. So all the time, like, I have this one neighbor, he's a coder for another automotive company. And he's like, I have this whole like 5-part series that I've written. I'm like, dude, let's make a podcast. I'm like, let's do a podcast. He's like, really? I'm like, dude, let's do this. I got all the stuff. We'll set it up and let's just record 5-part series. We'll put it out. I'm like, because I just love creating this stuff now. It's so much fun. And I'm so happy that I was able to make a real legitimate business out of having fun, like there's times when it's hard, like editing these things are hard. There can be frustration. Like the episode that I just had release, it's going to be 2 ago when this one comes out, with the MRC recap, like in post editing, I don't know what happened, but the audio got off. And like that stressed me out for 2 days, is trying the best I could to fix the audio. I eventually had to have my post-production house do their best. And it's not perfect, but I don't know what happened because the file that I exported was completely perfect. Everything was right. And I don't think it's any fault of the post-production. It's just these sorts of things start to happen and it can be frustrating. If I record an episode that I think is spectacular, it might not get the love. Like when some of the episodes that I think are like less serious and more goofy, those ones get tons of love. Like, it's just, the formula is really, really, really weird when it comes to this. And like, I understand why YouTubers do some of the things they do with like thumbnail manipulation and those sorts of things. So
I think, that gets back to, again, the unemployment aspect of, you're not in control, right? You don't know what, for us with Arkowl, I'll put out, I'll really advocate for a certain feature to go out. And then when it goes out, there's like no increased usage, no feedback, no nothing. And, nobody cares about it. But then, something random that we'll put out, everybody's like, wow, this is amazing. How'd you know to put that in here? And I was just like, well, that some stuff is just out of your control, how
right?
people respond to different things.
It's so strange. And let's do that. Let's kind of skip, because if anybody wants to know the history of Arkowl, we have an episode with Rob. I'll link it below, that you can go hear the true history of Arkowl. But let's jump, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but let's jump to the section about like some of the crazier things that we have learned. And that is definitely one of them, like the features and our expectations of what's going to be popular not being as popular. Like I mean, my last sponsor was Sardine, and they, Eduardo over there, he's really fast. He's brilliant. He was like telling me when he listens to podcasts, he wants to pretend he's at a conversation with his friends. He's listening to his friends. He's like, but I want the topic to be like what I like, And that resonated with me so strongly, because like I could try and craft these episodes as technical as possible. But at the end of the day, we all want to pretend we're like hanging out in the backyard, having beers, talking shop. That's really what people want to hear. And if there's learning, which there always is in those, like that makes it fun and accessible. So that's what the new show is going to be all about. This one's still going to be a little more technical.
I like both sides. The technical one, you learn a little more. I'm an auditory learner, so as I hear things, I pick them up. But I think the kind of the off the cuff type stuff, you get a little more of that relational vibe. You kind of get to know somebody.
Yep.
So then you feel more comfortable maybe reaching out and saying, hey, I heard this the other day. I'd like to chime in and help with that or something.
I've told this story on here before, and I'll kind of just briefly tell it again. But I was not a big podcast listener historically in my life. I have one show that I listen to, and I still listen to it every day. I need to listen to today's episode though. And it's called The Ralph Report, and it's the guy that used to be on K-Rock Radio in the morning show down here named Ralph Garman, and he did the entertainment report, and he always do like fun voice impressions. He does a lot of the voices on Family Guy, like when it's usually when it's a fake celebrity voice, it's probably Ralph doing it. But he started a podcast after he got let go, again, unemployed from the radio show. And there was this UK correspondent, this random funny guy that would be on this podcast and tell really crazy stories as it relates to UK news. So Spice Girls, Ed Sheeran, James Corden, the Queen at the time, and all this. And it just so happened that coincidentally, he worked in our industry. He was an employee at a Certify, and I was a customer of a Certify. And I found that out, and I reached out to him, and him and I became friends, like personal friends, where we were in Nashville hanging out together. When he would come to LA, we would hang out. I would go to his show. He was on my show. He was one of my first episodes. Again, I'll link that one below. I really treasure that episode. But it was really interesting to see, it gave me the courage to reach out because I felt like I knew him from listening to him for so long and not knowing he was in the industry. And it's so true. I'm listening to these three guys have these conversations that I'm not a part of, but I feel like I'm a part of it. And you see that when you go to their live shows, when they do their live tapings, is everybody feels like they're part of the family. They feel like they know these people. And I felt like I knew Steve, but I was fortunate that I got to know Steve. Steve has since passed away. He passed away in August of last year. But it was just such a weird familiarity that I had when I did reach out to him. And when we started talking, we already had for me at least, we already had a lot of the small nuances of getting to know a new person out of the way. So, yeah.
So do you feel like the podcast, though, it only goes one way, right? Do you feel like he knew you?
No, definitely not.
You knew him, right?
Yeah. I would say that when we first started talking, there was a little bit back and forth on email. But then since we knew some of the same people, and then we were on LinkedIn and he was on my Facebook, he knew the type of person that I was. So when we were in Nashville, it was just what's up, hanging out, having fun, having beers. We were sitting outside, drinking beers out on one of the honky tonks, for hours, just talking, and it was very natural because him and I had a very similar personality. Believe it or not, everybody, I'm pretty liberal in my life. And he was too in the UK sense. So when a lot of the stuff started popping off back in 2020, him and I were on the same page. So we would egg each other on social media to try and get people riled up. It was, what could you do in 2020 besides troll people at the end of the day? But yeah, I would say, but I think back to that and how, you feel like these people that you listen to, especially when you listen to them on a regular basis. You really do. And I would say if you go back and you listen to the conversation that him and I had, that was our first time talking on the phone like this when we recorded that episode. And you could tell how relaxed and comfortable. The audio's not the greatest from my side because I wasn't using an amp. I'm working on trying to clean that up with some of the new AI stuff that I have. But it's really a natural conversation. The conversation is fantastic. He was in business, what we call emotional development, emotional intelligence. So helping businesses get the most out of their employees. So he was doing workshops after certifying him parted ways. He how to get in touch with how to be a better manager, basically. And that's something that I'm pretty passionate about. So him and I, I did a lot of research going into that episode, and you can really hear him come alive when he gets to talk about the types of things that he was working on and how passionate he was about individual personal development in professional settings. And his story was really, really, really cool. So I encourage everybody to go listen to that. It's Steve Ashton episode. It's in season 1. I believe it is probably episode 5. I think it's episode 5. Pretty sure. So, yeah. Yeah. So what are some crazy things? What else have you learned in your journey at Arkowl?
Well, crazy things, huh? I think, that I think each year that rings true that much more. You're not in control. I think, just several years ago, we got the opportunity to bring on a new partner and David as the CTO. David was a next door neighbor.
Really?
Yep. So my wife was going to school at UNC at the time, and David was a next door neighbor, and he just walked over at one point when I was outside, and he was just like, I know you run a business. I could use some extra hours. I'm a software developer. And so I said, I'll throw hours at you. And he did such a good job contracting for us, learning the ins and outs of how Arkowl worked as a contractor, that come time when Mike said he was going to take a step back. Come that time, I was kind of like, who are we going to get? And it was just like David came to mind, like, who else knows Arkowl code and the process better than David? And I just asked David, I said, how would you feel about being the CTO and, leaving the company that you're at to accept this sort of position? And he got back to me with maybe in a month.
Oh, my.
But I think he's looked back with no regrets. He's loved it. And it was just like, to just meet somebody next door, right? I think
That's so crazy. Yeah. And like that he just walked over and introduced himself and said, this is what I do. And then now that ended up being your CTO. Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah. So that was one that was crazy. I think, my dad growing up always gave me the advice, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it was like, you never know when you'll meet somebody that will, affect other things in life, right?
Absolutely. That's so crazy. We have our notes over here. And I think one of the things that you have on the notes here that I did want to call out specifically on this is how to make a product that people are aware of. Because like you had 2 parts on here. It's like you have to make the product, and then you have to make the product that people are aware of. And the second part's more crucial.
Yeah, I did.
Than the first part.
I did not know that going into business, right? We just took the leap of faith thinking, we got a good product or something that people are using. And I think it was those first couple months of Arkowl, I was doing my best to promote. And Jason Taylor, who was previously, the manager at Best Buy, who was a part of laying me off.
Yeah.
But he was also the one who trained me in fraud. He actually shared with an email chain within the MRC, just, hey, we've been using Arkowl to solve this problem.
So that guy has like made up for laying you off.
Yeah, I don't know as if he shouldn't have felt bad from the beginning. I understand it's a business decision and he reached out afterwards, but I don't think it's out of guilt that he helped us early on. But he definitely did. And call out to him, if he's listening. Thank you, Jason. But yeah, that was one where it was like after that point, we were a well-known service and tool in the industry, being used by, way more than just Best Buy. And that kind of set the groundwork for, marketing, and just a lot of maybe what we had to do in the first 3 years was just update our product and keep the product moving to the point where it wasn't just Yahoo emails coming in.
So now that the product is mature and you have all these data sources and your own data sources, were you surprised at the split of API usage versus like, can you throw some numbers out, some more like recent numbers?
I think, the split is probably 80 to 90% API usage.
That's crazy. See, that's what, like, I think what people listening to this, you might not realize is like, you might think that like, and some of the stuff I'll be overlaying as throughout this episode is like, a lot of it's going to be, you have to copy paste and read it in, but that's not the case. Like the majority of Arkowl's service is API usage and automating this. And I think that that's where we seem to all be trying to land, is get them, like I'm all about it. Like get the machines to do the heavy lifting. Like if it can be done with a machine accurately and consistently, then we should be using machine to do it at the end of the day.
I think the data gathering should be done on a machine, right? I think there is a spot for the analyst to review what's been flagged,
but it needs to be set up
data.
for them. It needs to be available. Like the data. This is like whenever I would help design at like companies when they would contract me to help design dashboards for them or for like analysts to look at, I would always say, me as an analyst, I want to be able to have all of the relevant information that I need to see displayed on one single screen without scrolling. And that's like, what is the product? Who is buying it? Where is it going? How much did it cost? Like those are like the four fundamentals. And like when I say like who's buying it, that includes the things like your phone number, your IP address, all of the stuff that like you guys are providing, Like I'm trying to determine who is the person, where is it going, basically, and what is it at the end of the day.
Data gathering should not be in the fraud analyst job description. The data gathering should be done for them.
100%.
You shouldn't be a data gatherer, right? Data gatherer is a different job. So that's our thought process at Arkowl, is data gathering is a different job meant for, a data gatherer, a company that does that, or a different role that does that. The fraud analyst is the one assessing the data. That's where we're trying to go. That's why we have 80 to 90% API usage. We maybe in 2015 we saw the shift in the industry to really a lot of our clients were saying, "Where is the API? How can we use an API?" So that's been the shift. There is, how can we get this in the hands of the machines, or just get all the data in front of the analysts so that they don't have to have 80 different tabs open.
So let's talk about one last part before we start to wrap up and we'll talk about like your prediction for the future, what you're trying to do. And then we'll do a quick little MRC recap since we just got back from that. Let's talk about sales for a second. So I just today hired a salesperson to help me with sales. Like as I dread, which is weird because I used to work retail sales and I was just fine at it. Like selling stuff to people face to face is one thing, but like selling sponsorships and selling stuff over email, I just don't have it in me. Like I just want to record and make content. I want to get paid to do it, but like I'd rather pay somebody to help me get paid to do it. It's a better use of my time at the end of the day. So I just hired somebody. So how do you guys approach sales? What do you guys think about sales?
We actually haven't invested as much into sales as maybe our competition. I personally, we invest as much in the product and really try to have the product cause people to talk about it and cause, the analyst to sell us to the manager, or the manager to sell us to the director, saying, we've used Arkowl. We've found it to be something special, something that's saving us money. Can we invest further into it? Or they're, fraud teams talking to other fraud teams saying, we use Arkowl for this purpose. It's been really great. That's far better than any salesperson, because a salesperson is from us, right? It's on the inside saying, hey, I'm Rob. I love Arkowl. I created Arkowl. Use Arkowl. We're the best, right? How can you trust me? But another fraud analyst talking about it saying, we use Arkowl. We love Arkowl. It's saving us tons of money, tons of time. If you're not using it, you should use it. That means way more. And that's something, kind of going back to that other question, that's something that I didn't know when starting the business. When starting a business, you're thinking, if I have a great idea for a product, then I'll have a great business. This is where it's like, we have a great idea as to how to sell it to, and that was one thing I didn't realize about the fraud industry or just in general was the great idea of how to sell it to the fraud industry is actually fraud people talking about it, saying, this is a great product. But in order to do that, you actually have to have a great product.
Yeah.
So we invest a lot into R&D.
I would say that, you'll see, and we've talked about it on here before, but if you go on you search any company on LinkedIn, and then just go to what the types of jobs that people do, you'll see the companies that have mostly salespeople versus R&D. And those are usually the ones that you get a lot of emails from different people because there's a lot of attrition on their sales departments. But I think that you guys have a pretty unique way where anybody can kind of use the product to test it out first for free, right? Like it's free.
Yeah.
And that's how you get, and what is it like? It's like the drug dealer thing. The first one's on us, man. First hit's always free. But, and I think that's a really smart way to do it.
Yeah. We're pretty generous with that. I think one of the mentalities I've had, yeah, we should, but, I actually get that from clients. So we should be less generous with that.
There's, in MaxMind, they only give you $5 of credit for queries. So the queries cost, they have a fixed fee that they cost, but you only get a fixed free, like you create an account and they load like $5 of credit onto your account. And then when that's gone, then it's over, like you can do something like that.
MaxMind is pretty reasonably priced.
Oh, 100%.
I think they're okay for that. But I think
they power a lot of people's stuff too. People don't realize that like MaxMind, MaxMind is probably some way involved in most of y'all's fraud tools listen to this too, whether you realize it or not.
At some core level, MaxMind is there.
What's the future of Arkowl now? Like let's just rattle off your short term, your midterm, and your long term.
Yeah, short term we got we just made a new hire in our development. And that's going to be announced in a future news announcement there. I think increased speed. We're hiring developers to increase speed, increase data.
Yeah, nice. What about midterm?
Midterm, we'd like to see more automated clients. We want to get that number from 80 to 90 up to 99.9% of our usage is.
You could just deprecate the portal altogether, and then
can't do that. The portal is our onboarding.
That's how you get people hooked. Excellent. What about long term? Let's rattle off that long term.
Long term, we want to have a mentality of continuing to invent. I really like the idea of kind of where, Steve Jobs and Apple, everybody likes that, but just, the guy was always trying to invent new things. And if Apple wasn't inventing, he saw it was trouble and wanted back into it. So that's long term. I want to have that mentality. I want our team to have that mentality. I want to really set a culture now that we're having more people on the team. I want to set a culture of invention within the team, really loving the product, being able to talk. I want everyone on our team to be a natural salesperson of our product.
All right, man. Well, let's as we wrap up here, let's finish on just a quick little MRC touch. We just both got back from MRC. Both had great shows. Mine was a little different this year than normal. I had a little more time to do regular stuff since I wasn't speaking as much. Yeah. How was your MRC?
Our MRC was really good. I think our mentality going into it was because our team is remote, being able to connect with our team, as well as continue to be able to meet I shouldn't say random, but continue to meet with clients who I get emails from. So that's good. But one of the big features that we have that just came out was one that was actually recommended to us by Charity from Ticketmaster while at the MRC, which is kind of a fraud scam alert, when you put an email into Arkowl, we'll actually provide back whether the email has been seen in a scam or fraud alert in the past.
And people buying themselves gift cards for those random phone calls to get their nephew out of jail. Happens every day.
Yeah, so kind of like our mentality of let's get everything in one place. This is one of those things that we're getting in one place where you don't have to go to, that place to gather data as well. So maybe we trim the 30 tabs down to 29 tabs.
Hey,
that an analyst has open.
And in Google, that's RAM.
Yep.
Well, awesome, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show and talking about your business. Hope everybody enjoyed that little rundown business lane on how we've evolved these businesses over the last couple of years. Yours over the last 10 years and mine over the last 2.5. But it's been like a thank you for showing how long ago I really actually registered FraudBoxer. I guess it's technically 8 years old now, even though
I think as we discussed, I think the most things you learn in a business is kind of that pre-stage and maybe those first 3 years. And then as you're going, maybe it's a little more things.
I'm almost
over time.
locked and loaded then.
Yeah, hopefully it's a gradual hill from here as opposed to that steep.
Yeah, because it got a little aggressive. I never expected to monetize this thing. So once it started making money, it got a little more than I had expected initially. So it's been fun though. I mean, I like learning. I mean, like I said, I'm passionate about it. So it's been fun to learn. I just don't like when tax season comes around anymore. I used to not care. Now it matters.
Well, we don't know what the future holds, but hopefully it is more gradual from here.
Hopefully. I can't wait. And same for you. I'm excited, always excited to see your business grow. Happy to see you're adding new connections. I'm happy about your new hires. I know who they are. The world doesn't yet, but that's just, that's special information. So when you're able to divulge that, I'm super proud of that. It's also great to see your booth growing. That means the business is growing. So just really stoked for your success and for your business, and can't wait to continue seeing you around, man.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. It's always great to chat.
Always a pleasure, man. And we'll do it again soon, man. Take care. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Don't forget to use the link in the description below to get your very own House of Fraud membership for only $1 a day. We have 7 original series, an amazing jobs board, and the best part of all is a community filled with fraud leaders and fraud experts for you to ask questions, learn from, and just participate in general fun. Because no one goes to school for fraud fighting, we've created the House of Fraud just for you. I can't wait to see you in there.